The podcast you're about to hear is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin, as retold to you by 2 other youths. It is all the more tragic in that they were young, but had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and the macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day led to the making of one of the most acclaimed and terrifying horror films in the annals of film history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Welcome to the Final Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bogutska, co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. If you're new to the show, welcome. In real life, the Final Girls put on events and screenings that explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. And on the show, we take a horror trope and we rip it apart, rummage around in its thematic entrails, and figure out why it works, does it hold up, and what it says about wider horror. This is the first episode in our 4th series, which is going to be our longest one yet, and an exploration of teen horror, how it's evolved, and why teenagers, and especially teenage girls, make some of the most compelling protagonists in horror films. Before we dive into our film this week, a quick reminder, we are on Twitter and Instagram at The Final Girls UK, and we do have a Patreon, like all millennials, where you can support our work, getting occasional bonus episodes and other goodies. But no pressure, all of our main season will continue to be free on this feed. We're starting our teen horror season with arguably one of the most fertile and creative decades for horror filmmaking, the 1970s, also known as the golden age of the slasher. But before we get to Halloween, before we go to Carrie's bloody prom party, we have to talk about Tobe Hooper's 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close,
Crazy! You gotta make us stop!
just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
One of the most lauded and influential horror films of all time, it spawned a franchise of films, remakes, video games, gave us an unforgettable final girl, and one of the most iconic horror killers, the cannibalistic Leatherface, loosely inspired by the real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who, much like Leatherface, had a knack for making decorations out of human flesh and also killing people. If you're new to the show, please know we spoil pretty much everything from the very beginning. So if you're averse to conversations about a film that you haven't watched yet, and if you haven't watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'm so excited for you to experience this film for the first time. Go watch it, listen back to this episode, and let us know what you thought. Joining me on the first episode of this new series on teen horror is the wondrous writer and actor Isora Barbara Brown, who not only reduced me to tears of laughter in this episode, but also has written beautifully about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the Bloody Women Film Journal. I'll link to her pieces in the show notes, and I really encourage everyone to follow Isora's writing on horror. With all of that said, join us for a deep dive into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Welcome back onto the podcast, and especially welcome to the first episode of the 4th series, which is going to be all about teen horror.
I'm very excited about this season. Very, very excited.
I'm excited too. I'm very excited. I think this might be the season that ends me because it's going to run until June next year, which seemed very funny when I was planning it. And now I'm a little bit concerned.
Nah, you got this. So many, like, I love this. I've seen the list of films. I'm very excited for like each and every single one. We also like we were tweeting about The Hole recently because it just got put on Netflix, which I feel like could be thrown in the mix.
It's a Patreon special. We get to dust off my DVD of The Hole.
I can't wait. Because it is just like, I was like, I forgot about this film. I'm like, this film was bonkers. But so I'm very excited. And some of my favorite horror films are teen horror films.
There's a lot. And some of the, when I was researching the season, one of the things that I started thinking is like, are some of these kind of classic horror films, classic slashers as well, are they teen horror? So we're going to start with potentially a controversial choice. I'm doing this chronologically for the most part. So chronologically, we had to start here. So do you think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, before we dive into the film itself and your relationship with it, is it a teen horror?
Probably just in there, because I reckon they're like, at least maybe one or two of them are 19 and like a couple of the others are 20. Mm-hmm. But they're like on the verge of adulthood. There's certainly not people who are like, we're adults with our shit together and we have jobs and stuff. Like, they're definitely like of that vibe of like college students or so I'm gonna say yes. And I also feel like it's the granddaddy of like slasher films. So I'm just like, you know what, like it's ripe for like all the other films in the genre. It kind of, so I think it counts. I'm saying officially
this is canon now.
It counts. Yeah,
I think the first few episodes that we're gonna do are kind of these absolutely hyper influential horror films from the 70s.
Yeah.
Texas, and they kind of came in very quick succession, and we're looking at each other as well. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Carrie, all of the Nightmare on Elm Street, all of them except Texas are very explicitly about the teenage experience. So I'm really choosing to, because as you say, it's the granddaddy of slasher films. Let's make Texas Chainsaw Horror Massacre, let's make Texas Chainsaw Massacre a canonical teen horror film because it fits. They're on their gap year.
The Final Girls have done it. It's official. Alert whoever you need to alert. We've made it official.
Amend the Wikipedia pages. It's officially a teen horror. So you've mentioned many times how much you love this film. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with the Texas Chainsaw Horror Massacre? With the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm going to really struggle pronouncing this.
You're just like adding words every single time. You're like, the Texas, specifically Dallas. Maybe near Houston.
The Houston Chainsaw Massacre. What is your relationship with it?
I love it. Like you said, I've said many times to anyone who will listen how much I love this film. It's my favorite ever horror film. The first time I saw it was when I was a teenager. I was 14, I believe. Was I 14? I think I was younger than this. No, I wasn't 14. I was younger than that. I think I was like 9 or 10.
Wow.
My brother was older. And yeah, I was really young. Or maybe I was 14. I don't know. I was young. I was too young to see it. Me and my brother recorded it off the TV. We knew it was coming on like in the evening. We had to plan our time our VCR. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we recorded it and watched it and were both really freaked out and were like, we were too young to see this. That was horrifying. But then I've watched it like a million times after that, and it's just, there's just nothing like it as far as I'm concerned, and it just holds up in a way that other films of like that time necessarily, don't necessarily hold up, especially a horror, especially a horror that's so specific to time, like to the time and place it's set. It just works really well still. And it's my favorite just for like, it still feels new. Like the stuff it's doing the stuff it does throughout the film, the ways it's actually like scary, still feel really new to me and unusual and fresh. And there's always something that like you notice like when you watch it again. And I literally just can't know how many times I've watched it. I love it so much. Yeah, big fan.
As I've mentioned in the introduction, obviously this is going to go into detail about the film, but can you set the scene for anyone who might not have rewatched it recently? Like, what is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre about? Like, who are lead characters? What's happening to them?
Right. So basically it starts with this kind of, it's like a radio news story about a grave being, or like, I guess this one, the news story is particularly about this new grave atrocity where they dug up parts of body and like made a kind of weird like body sculpture on top of a grave. Like they've desecrated graves, and it's been happening, and it's in a specific graveyard in Texas. So this group of kids, namely Sally and Franklin, the ones they name in the prologue, which is who their granddaddy's like buried in the. I was saying granddaddy instead of granddad. I don't know, but like it's like a new thing. But their granddad is buried in the cemetery that has been one of the places that's, you know, the graves have been dug up. So they're going to check that their granddad's grave is still fine. And while they're doing that, they decide to also go to their grandfather's old abandoned house and check it out. Yeah, they're driving in a VW van, and they go to their granddad's old abandoned, like overgrown, like dilapidated house. And it's based on Ed Gein, who was a serial killer.
He did arts and crafts with bits of human skin.
So that's where it sets. It's really hot. It's like middle of nowhere Texas. It's a scary Texas. It's not like, oh, Austin, Texas. It's like, no, here's scary Texas, actually. Yeah, and they're just like driving around. It's the 70s. They're like kind of hippies, kind of, and they're a bit like, you know, not really concerned about anything. They're just going on this trip, and they're not really worried. They have no cares in the world until they do. That's what happens.
I love that. I mean, okay, we're set up. Now we're going to get into the massacre part. We've covered the Texas part.
Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of at the start that you feel like this horror film is so of its time and was so original for the time in which it was made as well. So this came out in 1974, but it's set in August 1973 and was shot around that time as well. What makes you say that? How is it so indicative and emblematic of America in the 1970s?
Well, the minute you see what we're calling for this podcast teens, they just, you know, when something just looks like an era, there's just no mistaking what era it is. It's also that thing of horror films where there's so much that happens that couldn't happen now, couldn't happen at a certain, like, even like a few years later. Just there's no real connection to anything else. Once you get to that part of like the country, you're really isolated, actually. There's nothing close by. Phones are scarce. And it's also indicative of the era of like when people did hitchhike a lot, like around America. When it wasn't weird to pick up hitchhikers, when it wasn't weird to just go on like massive drives with your friends in your van and just for like no apparent reason. Like, do you mean? And it, you know, you weren't flying somewhere. You weren't, you know, oh, we'll just get like the train or whatever. It was like, no, we drive around. We're kind of carefree about it. We didn't have to plan this out too much. We're not really scared of certain things. Like, this is before we knew about, not before it definitely was happening. Like, people were being murdered, people were being like snatched or whatever, but they weren't as big. It's not something that people were scared about actively, like we are now, like we were like not that long after, like maybe 10 to 15 years after that, where it became like a thing of like, oh shit, like people snatch and rape and murder people. So there's just this feeling of like zero cares and zero real worry about them. And even the points when they do get worried, like when Sally and Franklin are left on their own, it doesn't feel like a fear like, oh, someone's hurt them or something. It's more like they're lost,
Like,
and we want to go. Maybe someone's fallen and got hurt. Maybe, I mean, it's more that fear, and it doesn't seem to ever cross their mind that someone would have just been out to hurt them.
yeah, it's that sort of lack of assuming the worst, and also lack of distrust. Because right now, and you're right, like even a few years after, in the 80s, you would automatically distrust a creepy looking hitchhiker. And they kind of see and mention at the beginning of the film, when they pick up the hitchhiker, it's like, oh no, he's a little bit weird looking, maybe let's not. But they still do, because it's the American thing to do. It's the correct thing to do. It's neighborly. And there's, even when he's starting to creep them out and weird them out, they're still not, like, they're scared, but they're not assuming he's gonna come for them or hurt them in any way that they cannot kind of handle, or that he's just being a little bit odd. There's no point where they kind of think, oh, he is full on gonna murder us, or he has marked our van in order to send a sign to someone else, which was instinctively the first thing I thought of when I was rewatching the film today. I was like, oh yeah, like he marked the van so the rest of his family would know which van they had to go after. But at the time, it was just like, oh, he smushed, he put some blood on our van. How annoying for us. There's no further worrying about it. And I wonder as well, kind of, how do you think that initial introduction, the storytelling aspect, the kind of the prologue where it sets the date, and it basically sets us up for violence, where it says, this was this atrocious, mad, macabre thing that happened to these young people. And it's not telling us who gets killed, but it's kind of implied by that introduction that everyone's gonna die. How do you think that kind of feeds into the weird, kind of almost true crimey vibe that the film has from the very beginning?
I think it works really well, because you go in the same way which is not an obvious comparison, but in the same ways that Star Wars like sets you up, you're like, yeah, okay, here's my long like wordy prologue bit. And you go, okay, I know where I am now. And then you can relax. You can be like, okay, I get it. I'm ready. Talk to me more about space. And like the same way you're like, okay, I get it. I get the backstory to this. And I think it helps having both like the written thing on the screen that's read out, and then also the radio like news, because I'm just like, it feels real. They kind of get like the exposition out the way like right at the beginning, and they're like, and now you're just gonna watch it like a voyeur almost. Like it's not going to be cinematic in a way you're expecting necessarily. It's like I think you mentioned it's like documentary style, like so that at no point do you really get, I don't know, we don't know anything about these kids apart from their granddad's house is there and he's buried there, and that Franklin and Sally are brother and sister, and that maybe this guy's her boyfriend, and like this other people are a couple, but literally there's not really any exposition. We don't know anything about the family who like end up murdering them like in detail, and I like that. I like they're like, no, this is just what it is. If you were just watching this as a person watching this happen, you wouldn't have all these details. They talk like they know each other, which isn't in a way that gives you a lot of detail about their history or how they met or their lives. And I really love that, because films they love exposition now. They're just like, let me just drop in this line about how we know each other, or like, let me call someone sis or bro for no reason. And it's like really annoying, because I'm like, I have a brother. Never once have I been like in public, like, bro, like, what? So it's, I really love it. I really love that they do that setup, because it just kind of gives you enough information to leave you to be in that world of the film. And you don't need more.
And it also gives you a perfect blank canvas onto which to project yourself, because the lead characters, the kids, they're kind of, we don't get too much information about them, or even the relationship between them, or even what they're like character-wise, which means that you can essentially empathize and project yourself onto any one of them. And the same, I mean, we'll get into the family in a bit, but we're not told that much we kind of are left to fill in the blanks. And part of it just feels so like a creepy fly on the wall documentary. And it's kind of shot in that way. And at the same time, it's really like it's playing on what I imagine at that time in mid-70s America, where also just the rumblings or the end of the 60s had happened, the Manson murders had already happened, kind of the hippie love bubble had been burst very violently. And now all of these stories about these atrocities that were being committed both by individuals, so like serial killers and people like that, who we're now obsessed with even decades later. You know, let's not forget there was the Zodiac killer in the 70s as well. The Ted Bundy, I think, is more the 70s, and then he'd get apprehended in the 80s. So like it's kind of a big boom, or at least people being caught for their crimes that were horrific and really captured the public imagination. And at the same time, there's also, you know, the government lying quite openly to the American public, and that also being exposed, which essentially meant that all of these, you know, culturally, there was this weird conflation of, oh, the people who told us that everything was okay and that we're supposed to trust are actually lying. And also maybe people generally are kind of scary as well. Like all of these things that are going on literally behind closed doors, literally in the middle of nowhere, in small towns, people who were kind of the local harmless creepy dudes, like Ed Gein was considered in his small town where he lived and grew up. Like, oh yeah, Ed's a bit weird, but you know, he's harmless. Turns out not so harmless. Not so harmless at all. So it kind of throws the shade of doubt across everyone. And it means that the characters kind of are completely replaceable. Because it could be Sally, it could be Franken, it could be you or me. It could be anyone. Like, it's so easy to empathize with them because they're essentially blank canvases. And I don't mean that in the sense of like taking away from the performances, because we will talk about Marilyn Burns and her performance in particular, because fuck my life, that was amazing.
I know, but you know, it's just like, I think what you mean is like they're not special.
Yes.
And I think there's that thing of like they want to make, oh, the reason this has happened is because these people are special. Like, no, they're not special. They're regular people. And even the fact that they didn't do that thing where like, this one's the chatty one, this one's the blah blah. It's like, no, they're all quite similar, because that's why they're friends, probably. Because they're quite similar, quite kind of boring, regular people. And that's what's scary about it, is that it could happen to any one of you. And like, none of them's special enough that you're like, well, this one's going to be the one that survives. It's like, who knows? All of the first time you watch that film, you really couldn't tell who's gonna die first, who's going to survive. And I feel like with a lot of other films, you can tell. You're like, he's going to die first. She's going to survive. And then they use that and then flip it on its head. It's like, in this one, it could be any one of them. And you wouldn't be surprised if all of them died. So I think you're right. It's just like, none of them are special. They didn't make any of them like stand out. It's like, no, they're regular. That's what's so scary. They're just having a regular old time.
And actually, kind of picking up on your point, it's kind of quietly rewatching. It's like, oh, it's Kirk who gets murdered first. And obviously Sally is the final girl, but Franklin is also, I believe, the penultimate one to get killed. So actually it's kind of killing the people who we least expect to be, the characters who we expect to be the less vulnerable ones. They're the ones to go out first of all. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to talk as well about the structure of the film, because it really struck me for a film that's under 90 minutes long, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
And also, hurrah, like no more 2.5 hour long films, please. I don't have time for that. No. It's kind of like quite solidly divided in two, right? Because there's the beginning where it's everything is in the daylight, which we'll come to, but they pick up this hitchhiker and things get a little bit weird, and then there's the first murders and we see Leatherface, and then there's a very distinct, I thought, second part, which is after Sally's first escape, when she thinks she finds safety in the gas station and then gets captured by essentially the daddy of the Leatherface family, and taken back into that house, and kind of has the dinner scene and the second wave of violence that the film goes. What do you think of the film kind of being so almost very neatly separated?
I really like it because it really, like, it is a short film, but you feel every single minute of this film. Like, so when so Franklin gets murdered by Leatherface, and then the noise of that chainsaw, she's just being chased by Leatherface for ages. It feels like ages. And the sound of a chainsaw and just her screaming, and you're literally it's so distressing. And then it abruptly stops when she reaches the gas station, the barbecue place. And you're like, the relief you feel. So I think they put you through what Sally's going through, because you feel the relief with her. You realize something's wrong with her. And then you're just like the kind of resigned, distraught that she is. Because you're just like, what? Like, how do you... There's no way out of this now, like, surely. And then it's like all mostly in the house after that, which is very different from what we see. It's not like running and chasing. It's just kind of this horrifying dinner scene, which is just a tonal shift, because you get to see like this family dynamic, this bizarro like family dynamic that she's just witnessing the same way we're witnessing it. And you're just like exhausted, and you're just like, how is she going to... It feels hopeless. And it feels like too much. And I think it's because you go through it with her. Like they really make the most of every single minute. Like they make the most of every single character in this film. No character is a small character in this film. There's no bit parts. There's no like someone who's on screen for like a minute is like really memorable, like really stands out. And I think they do the same with every moment of this film of story. They're like, oh no, like it's going to be relentless until it's not, until she actually gets out of there. It's going to be horrifying.
So let's talk about that very strange family, and especially the dinner scene, because talk about comedy horror. I couldn't help but laugh. Like, it's that sort of tension where it's like, I mean, obviously I've seen this film before, but I haven't rewatched it as many times as you. And it's like, oh, this is funny, but also, holy shit, this is like the worst Christmas dinner you can possibly imagine. And it's bizarrely like it's framed like in all-American Christmas dinner. Leatherface, bless his heart, is all dressed up in a blue suit.
Ugh.
And a tie. What a bumpkin.
What a little bumpkin.
Like,
he's
like,
just... He's playing mummy also as well. He's like trying to get the dinner on the table. He's like you know, wants everyone to have a nice time.
He's been cooking the chicken for like hours.
He's been in the kitchen. He's just like, just want everyone to sit down and have a nice time. Sally's kind of ruining it. I mean, not appreciating the ambiance of the evening that Leatherface is trying to put on. But like, yeah, it's weird because it's like, this is a scene we recognize, but there's nothing recognizable about it. So it's gone, here's a dinner scene, here's a family dinner scene. And it's just like, nothing is in its right place. Like, all of these things are not like the other. You know, you're just like, I don't know. But you really get a sense of what they're like as a family. Which is the more odd thing about it. It's like, I really understand this dynamic somehow. Because it's really clear because everyone's doing such good performances.
So what is the dynamic of this of the Leatherface family?
So Leatherface is like kind of the baby and the mummy at the same time. Like, he's like at home, he's like making home, like he's making the house nice. All these bones and like crafts. And but he's also like this kind of like nervous like baby character that needs kind of looking after. The hitchhiker is kind of the annoying adolescent son who is just coming into like manhood, who's trying to take over from daddy, who is the guy who runs the barbecue and gas place. And like adolescent son is like really excitable, loves the murder, loves talking about murder, you know, is saying stuff that's kind of awkward for the dinner table. Like, he keeps saying to like the daddy character, like he keeps being like, you don't do anything. He's like, we do all the killing. Me and Leatherface do all the killing. What do? You're just the cook, because he cooks a barbecue. And he's just like, that's all you do. Like, you don't do any of the hard work. So he's like saying all the awkward, the things that are not polite to talk about at the dinner table. The dad's like kind of enjoying the excitement of everything, but it's also like, okay, guys, you know what? Everyone calm. Every now and again, he like gets into it. He's a bit like, oh, this is fun. And he's like, you know what, everyone, actually calm down. Everyone stop screaming, making incoherent noises. Like, let's all just enjoy a nice meal.
And there's a grandpa.
And then there's grandpa who's rotting away in the corner. Grandpa who is literally half rotten, but is still the patriarch. Because that's all he does. He's just the oldest man of the family. So he's still the patriarch at the head of the table, even though he can't do anything.
Yeah, he needs to get the first piece of chicken. And by chicken, I mean Sally.
Yeah. First piece of, oh my god, he does get the first piece of Sally. Oh my god. And like, Sally's this guest who's being kind of rude. Because she's not picked up on any of the social cues at this dinner. Like,
the audacity of Sally.
She won't stop screaming, making it awkward fair. She won't sit still or stop screaming. It's very uncomfortable. Leatherface is just like all of a fuss. He's just like, oh, guys, please, can we just have a nice time? Every time Sally screams, Leatherface screams, and he's just like, oh. His nerves, he needs a Valium, like there's Leatherface. He's like, you know what, I've just tried really hard and it's really upsetting me. No one's...
I looked up the Nigella recipe. I've been slaving away in the kitchen for fucking hours.
So much work all day.
Like, you haven't even tried
and you know
it.
What? Actually, Hitchhiker's taking credit for murders. Like, what murders did you do, Hitchhiker man? You've done none today. It's been all Leatherface. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, actually, he's done all the work. He's not getting any of the real credit. And then he gets blamed for like the door being broken. He's like, the dad's just trying to blame him for stuff. He's like an angry husband who comes home and he's like, you've done something wrong here. And Leatherface has just been like spending his day trying to like murder all the people who keep turning up and like cook a nice meal. So yeah, it's like a really weird dynamic, but they all play a role and they all know what their role is.
I wanted to talk specifically about Leatherface because when we were talking before hitting record, you did mention that you have a soft spot for our good boy, good cook Leatherface, and
our good boy Leatherface. I just feel like he doesn't know any different. I don't feel like it's his fault.
I want to talk about like how he evolves from essentially, well, three things, really. Okay, this is like a big 3-part question / conversation starter. When we meet Leatherface in the film, he literally boinks Kirk on the head. It was like, boom, you're dead. Drags him away into his little arts and crafts cellar. And then we see Leatherface put the other girl on a meat hook, like horrible, violent shit. Like he's a villain. He's the murderer of the film. And then it's good boy Leatherface at the dinner table who's trying so hard to please the family. Like, and then there's everything that Leatherface became. So like it's such an amazing character, goes through such a journey, and then like post this film's release and obviously its legacy we can talk about later, but what do you love so much about Leatherface and how he originates and changes in this film?
He's not like, because even though he's like literally a faceless killer, right? We never see his actual face. He's not like your Michael Myers or your, I don't know, that guy at the summer camp with his
Freddy.
Yeah. He's not like one of that. He's not just a monster. He's not just like, I'm just out to... He's not stalking the woods, like trying to find people to murder. What's interesting about him as a killer is that he doesn't actually go looking for murder. The murderer, they all come to him. And like, this, like, and to be honest, so they go looking for, like, Kirk, and their name's Pam. Kirk and Pam go looking for the watering hole, which is dried up. They want to go swimming. It's dried up. They find a house. And he's like, oh, we can get gas from here. They knock on the door. Kirk's like relentlessly knocking on this door. It's like, no one is home, Kirk. Like, imagine, even in now, if someone was on your door, like, hello, you'd be like, either I'm home, I don't want to answer the door, or I'm not home. Like, literally, fuck off. Kirk's there, like, it's like, maybe just leave. Like, if Kirk had just left at that point, everything probably been fine. But, like, Kirk's like, then he opens, he's like wandering into someone's house. I'm like, you know what? I'm not defending Leatherface, but he gave him plenty of opportunity to leave. Like, he did not have to go all the way in.
Sounds
there.
like you were defending Leatherface.
I'm just saying, doesn't America have, like, stand your ground laws? I'm like, he's an intruder at this point. But, you know, you're just like, why are you... And this is because, again, like what we're talking about, no one had stranger danger at that point. No one had the fear of, like, the unknown. Mm-hmm. He's like, I feel like someone's in there, so I'm just going to go... Because it doesn't occur to him that maybe, yes, someone's in there, but they don't want to see you, or they're not in a state to see you, or, like, I don't know, or they might be dangerous. So he goes all the way... He makes it all the way to, like, the door on the way to the kitchen, and the leather... And I think, out of panic... more than out of malice, Leatherface is like, with a mallet and, like, hits him. Because he just seems a bit surprised. He's just a bit like, what are you doing in my house? So that first murder, I'll give him, like, you know, I'm like, what would we do in that situation? If some, like, weirdo, like, guy had walked into my... For all we know, Leatherface was terrified.
For all we know, Leatherface was just tenderizing some meat.
And, like, a stranger was in his house, he panicked, he hit him. I believe that story. And then Pam is like, well, where's Kirk now? And she's not like, maybe something happened to him and maybe I shouldn't go into this creepy house. Pam also fully goes in to, like, a different room. And I'm just like, why are you in the house? Why have you found yourself? And then she finds a room that's basically like a couch made of bones and, like, there's all kinds of, like, ornaments are made of, like, human parts and stuff. Now, rather than, again... I would, at that point, yes, I'd be scared, but I think I'd be like, I'm going to quietly leave.
Once you've seen anything made of bones, let's depart.
Maybe climb out this window, because that's the closest way, and I'm probably not going to run into anybody. Like, she's like, wah! Like,
if you go into anybody's house, and there is anything made out of nipples, or bones, or, like, human hair, or human skin, maybe just quietly leave. Like, you're not like, oh, where did you get this, like, nipple lamp? Is this IKEA? No.
Maybe don't make any noise. Like, no, not even quite. PSA guy, like, silently, leave silently. Please leave silently if you stumble into a living room that is, like, got a couch made of bones in it. Like, just very silently, don't make any noise, leave, don't turn around, get out of there as soon as humanly possible. But, like, yeah, so, and like, his Leatherface is just like, oh my, another one? So then he catches her, she's seen the bones now, what's he gonna do? Puts her on a meat hook, which is, like, I think the worst death, the most brutal, like, that's the worst thing that happens in it. That's the one thing I'm just like, oh my god, I can, like, feel it in my back. And then who comes looking for them? Sally's boyfriend, who's the other guy, who is called Jerry. Jerry comes looking for Kirk and Pam, who have clearly been murdered. And this day and age, we'd be like, well, they're murdered. They're dead. So we're not going to go looking for them. We're going to, like, call somebody or, like, go somewhere that's not, like, a dark, abandoned house in Texas where someone's digging up graves. Let's go somewhere else where it's, like, I don't know, city lights, and then call for help. But Jerry's like, I'm just going to go wandering off into the wilderness and look for them. And then he comes to the house, and then he sees, like, I think, like, a towel that they left that they were carrying outside on the porch. So then he also just goes in. So rather than go, I feel like something bad's happened, because if they were here, I don't know, it would be, like, this weird. He's like, I'll go in. I'll be fine. I'm Jerry. I'll go in. And then Leatherface also has to murder him. He finds Pam in the freezer. And then Leatherface is like, well, fuck's sake, murder him. And then Leatherface murders him and then has to sit down. Which might be my favourite part of the film. Leatherface is overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed with having to murder people. This was not his plan for today. And this is what I mean.
Leatherface did not need this today.
He wasn't. This is not his day. He had things to do, and now he's had to murder 3 people. He literally has to go sit down on the bone couch, put his head in his hands, and be like, "Oh my god, what the fuck's happening? Why do people keep turning up?" It's like if one Jehovah's Witness turned at your house, and then all day, there's 10 Jehovah's Witnesses at your door, and you're like, "Listen, I just didn't have this plan for today. I've been trying to I've not been saying anything when you've knocked on the door. I've literally not even come out. I've not said anything. I've hoped you've gone away, and instead you've walked directly into my house.
And now I've made a mess. And now who's gonna have to clean it up? This guy.
I've fucked the door. I've made a mess. There's a person in the freezer. It's just he's overwhelmed. He's literally just like, oh, so he's like a reluctant murderer. He's literally just like. I just wanted this one quiet day. No one's in. I had the house to myself, and people just kept fucking walking in. Literally, what's the worst part of it is that people were knocking and banging on the door, and he ignored it. It's not like he even came out like, "Well, I'm going to murder you." He's like, "Maybe if I don't say anything, you'll go away." And they didn't. And it's just the fact that he had to leave the kitchen area to sit down on a couch and be like, I just don't know what to say about this. I just don't know what to do. This is. And it's just my favourite moment in a horror film maybe ever. That he has to take that. I can't think of any other killer that's had to be like, I've done so many murders, and usually I love murder, but today it wasn't on the cards. I'm actually crying. That's what makes him go out and kill Franklin, because he's like, well, now I'm gonna go look for the rest of them before the rest of them come walking into my house. I'm gonna go take care of this, because no, I've had enough actually. And I think honestly that's why he's out there, because he's just like, I won't have this. I won't have this again. No, it's ridiculous. I love it.
I'm absolutely dead. There are actual. I'm really glad we're recording the Zoom, because there are actual tears down my face.
If you've never watched this film, please, for the love of God, really specifically pay attention to this scene, because it's something you miss when you first watch it, and then every rewatch you're like, wait, no, what? I want an expansion. I want to hear a monologue in his head.
I think you've just written it.
He is exasperated, and then
But I actually wanted to. He usually loves murder, not this day. But can we talk about the brand of violence in this film? Because I think it's one of those films that, I mean, its legacy and its influence is enormous. Probably arguably one of the most influential horror films ever made. And it still feels very scary and very kind of graphic. But actually, rewatching it, a lot of it is suggestion. A lot of it is montage. It's editing, and it's kind of this idea of kind of planting images in your head through the sound design and through the way they use editing.
Yeah.
But the violence we see is actually not that explicit or brutal, but it feels like it. Did you get that? Did you get that feeling of kind of rewatching it and feeling, I think this is more violent. I remember it being more violent than it actually is on screen.
Well, I think it goes back to them making you feel everything. You feel that hook go into her back from her face, from her reaction to it. You don't need to see it. And again, it's like you're a voyeur. It's as if you were watching it, right? So if you're watching it, you wouldn't get a close up of what the actual injury is. You'd see something happen, and you'd be like, oh no, this is what's happening. So even Kurt getting hit in the head, he kind of has this his body spasms when he hits the floor and stuff like that. It's all these really real seeming That's what it is. It seems more real, the violence. It doesn't feel like film violence. It feels very realistic. Like even Sally seeing Franklin get cut up, you see it from the back, like him getting, and it's just the horror of this thing, and even your brain trying to catch up with what's happening. Like, she literally doesn't know what's happening at this point. Someone's just literally come out of the woods with a chainsaw and is chopping up her brother. There's no time to think of like, oh no, my brother, or what's going on, or where's these other people. It's just like pure terror. And that's what you're feeling in that moment. And I think that's what's so smart about it. They know you don't need exposition. They don't need like close-ups or detail for it to be horrifying. And the sound design, like what I was saying, the violence comes in like what you're hearing, because it's like the expectation of violence. Sally running and her screaming and there being a constant sound of chainsaw not that far away is the violence, because that's all you hear as well. The bit where she's at the table and it's close-ups of her eye and her taking everything in and her just being sweaty and panicked and too exhausted to even really fight at that point. Like kind of like squirming, but like she's exhausted and she's in shock. And what do you do? And it's like, yeah, because actually in reality, you wouldn't be functioning like a regular person. Your brain wouldn't be functioning like planning things out and thinking clearly. It would just be all these weird things you're experiencing and these weird noises, the sharp strings they have at that point. Again, that's where the violence comes in. You're just like, just everything you're witnessing is violence. It doesn't need to be bloody or gory, because you feel like a person in that situation. You feel like these people are acting like how you would behave in that situation. It's just kind of like it comes out of nowhere and then it's over, or it's like still happening but you can't do anything about it. Like you're on a meat hook. Realistically, what are you gonna do? You get hit in the head like out of nowhere. What are you gonna do? Like someone comes at you with a chainsaw. Before you know what's happening, there's a chainsaw in your chest. Like, so I think it just didn't need it, and it's just such clever filmmaking to go, it wouldn't look real if we showed any of that, and you just don't need it. And our imaginations are always worse than what anything actually is. Imagining pain is worse than having it trying to be detailed for you. Like imagining what something feels like because you see the face of an actress and go, oh my God, I can imagine what that would feel like, is somehow worse than it just being like, here's a bloody close-up of a hook in her back and her like trying to get off it, or her like a long prolonged shot of like stuff he does to her, him putting her in the freezer. Like, you don't need to. You know it's going to be bad. So yeah, I just think it's really clever.
I think it was the first column that you wrote for Bloody Women. Your column Blood Perfect was actually about Sally, and I was rereading it earlier today before we started recording, and you mentioned there that you think that Sally is probably the best final girl in horror cinema, and I wanted to ask you kind of, what do you think of Sally, and why do you think she's the ultimate final girl?
It goes back to her being kind of nondescript, like all of them being kind of, but even in comparison to Pam's wearing a sexier outfit. She's talking about like horoscopes and like that kind of stuff, astrology at the beginning. She has more memorable dialogue or conversation at the beginning. She's wearing like a backless thing, and Sally's just kind of a blank, and you don't expect her to survive. And I like it because I like Sally specifically because of that, but also because it all feels very human. Her reactions to everything just feel very human. She's just trying to survive like a person would. She doesn't have the tools. She's not smarter than anyone. She's not stronger than anyone. She's not trying to outsmart Leatherface or the hitchhiker or the dad guy. She is like, the minute Franklin's dead, Sally is just trying to get away, which is the most realistic. I think so few horror films allow their protagonist to do that, to just be trying to escape, not get revenge, not like be smart, to just be like, I am going to run in a direction and hopefully I find someone who can help me or I can get away. And that's it. That's all of Sally's thing. And from the first, she's running from the chainsaw, she comes to the barbecue place. She's in shock. She's like, she doesn't know what's going on. She's barely like functioning. And then she's caught again. She's like, and there's nothing for her to do. It's like, there's no way for her to be smarter or to have got out of it. That was the closest place. Unfortunately, it's tied to like the rest of her tormentors. But Gimme, it's like, it's literally the closest place she can get to. It's what all of us would have done. Gone, oh my god, he seemed like a normal guy kind of when we stopped here earlier. He'll for sure help me. Why wouldn't he? How many of these people could there be? Like, and at this point, she doesn't even know the hitchhiker's attached, right? Like, she doesn't know he's attached to this family as well. So it just happens to be that every single person they've like met on this trip is connected in this horrible, horrifying way. And she jumps through 2 windows, which is why she'll be forever my favorite. I'm like, the fact that she's like, either I'll die or I'll be fine and I'll keep running. But the fact that she takes that risk, I'm like, yeah, because what else are you going to do? There's a window. You'll be trying to open it. She's just like, I'm going to hurl my body through this window and we'll see what happens. I'm like, yes, that is what we would be doing. Like, and I feel like, again, unlike other final girls necessarily, she feels like she knows she might die. She's like almost sure she's going to die, it feels like. It's purely chance. It's purely like a luck of circumstances that means she gets away. Because I think she's running because she doesn't know what else to do. But I don't think she thinks she's going to get away. And I love that. I love that she's allowed to be scared and human and not like super smart or strong or like outwitting anyone. She's just like, I don't know, I'm just going to run and jump through this window and see what happens and hopefully I get away. Even in the final part where she's running and the hitchhiker's slashing at her back, it feels inevitable that she's going to die. And she makes it. Against all the odds, she makes it. And I love that about her. I love that she laughs at the end. It's my favorite because I'm just like, yes, she's out of her mind. She's okay, but she's never going to be okay ever again. All her friends are dead. She watched her brother die. Horrific things have happened to her. And she's just laughing like a maniac because what else are you going to do?
It's hysterical laughter. And it's all of that kind of second part of the film that I mentioned before, kind of all the part from when she supposedly runs to safety at the gas station barbecue place. From the moment she realized she's not safe, in fact, she's landed right into the wolf's den, really. It's so hysterical. It's so visceral because Marilyn Burns who plays Sally, seems to basically be screaming or trying to physically wriggle out of being tied up or being hurt in some way for the remainder of the film. And that's like, I know, the second half of the film, like 40 minutes or something like that. And it's visceral because it does not stop when the grandpa, who's catatonic / almost zombified, is trying to murder her by hitting her in the head with a mallet like she's cattle. It keeps going and she won't stop screaming and trying to wriggle out, and it just keeps fucking going. It's almost comical because of the who these murderers are, but Sally and that performance is so visceral. It almost feels like she went into a fugue state and just would not stop yelling and screaming. And I know we're kind of making fun of Good Boy Leatherface and all of that, but it does feel so intense, and it's completely vanity free. Like, there is nothing about this that is titillating or pretty or easy to watch for anyone. And it's pure survival instinct. It's like, I will wiggle out in any way, shape, or form. It's essentially like a very animalistic performance, it struck me as, of someone who's like, I am caught in a place that I know is going to hurt me. I will, like, what's the thing that's going to hurt me the least? Just put as much distance between me and the danger as humanly possible. Even when she bumps into the truck driver at the end, she's like, she's happy to get run over if it means like potentially being saved. She doesn't even talk. She's just screaming at this guy and like thrusts open the door and like runs into there. He's not really very eager to help her at all. And when she finally like runs and jumps onto the truck that does not want to stop for her either, he's like, no, get the fuck out of this. This is trouble.
No.
it's almost like I don't care. There's no social norms anymore. I don't need to have a conversation about this. Just get me the fuck out of here. Like, there is nothing to discuss. I just need to put as much distance between Leatherface and the chainsaw and myself. Everyone else couldn't give a fuck anymore. Like, it's pure survival. And it's like, it's so visceral. Yeah. And when he's a lot of people talk about kind of that final shot of Leatherface in frustration, wielding the chainsaw around and kind of having this like weird frustrated dance and stuff. But it's Sally running manically from one truck to another, running through the woods, running onto the highway, jumping onto the truck, and then just like holding on for dear life, being like, oh my God, is he gonna jump on? Is he gonna get me? Is this other guy the driver? Maybe also an extended cousin of the family or something? But it just doesn't matter. Like, it's so unthinking and pure survival instinct at that point. It's so incredibly visceral. Like, it's scary in a way that feels more graphic than it actually is, but like you were mentioning, between the sound and the performances and the grainy, almost documentary like esque feel of it as well, it feels like we're watching someone in real turmoil.
Yeah, it really does. She's like you said, there's nothing pretty. She's a mess. There is nothing pretty about it. She is covered in blood. She's been like hacked to pieces. All the things like, and like you said, I honestly don't even know how she did that performance. Like, imagine just turning up to work every day and being like, so you're just going to scream for like several hours today. We get different angles of this shot of you, like screaming and being sweaty and covered in blood. Like, it would have been hell. Like, it would have been a lot, those scenes. And it's completely convincing. It's completely convincing. Like you said, your mind would just be like, I just need to get away. It doesn't really matter how. I just need to get as far away as possible from this house and this situation. And like, I love that she's not like, I think in other films not make the mistake, but like other films are more keen to do stuff like asking questions like, where's my family? It's like, I don't think your brain would be there when you're scared. And I think if you've ever been like really scared in your life, your brain just does not work like that. It's not logic. You're just like, it's fight or flight, right? You're just like, I'm working on autopilot almost at this point. And Sally so clearly is. She's just like, I just need to get out. That's my only goal, is to get out. And even when she jumps out the window at the end, so when they're trying to get the grandpa to hit her head with a little hammer thing to like kill her, and she's screaming and stuff and wriggling, it's by chance that she actually, like, again, part of me feels like she doesn't really think she's going to escape. And it's by chance that she actually realizes, and it's like, you could just see it, like, she realizes she can run. So she does, and she's not like, oh, let me try run upstairs or try in this door. She's like, here's a window. And she's out. Like, she's like, jumps out the window. And I love the shot where she lands on the ground. You're like behind her and you see her feet and you see her land. And you realize it's daytime because you actually have no sense of time. And she wouldn't either. Like, throughout the whole time she's in that house, she gets to the barbecue place at nighttime and she's brought back to the house and you have no sense of time. So it's even the fact that it's daytime. It's like, well, there's a feeling of like, well, she's made it this far. And like, that's what they really give you, like, you just feel like you're with Sally. And like you said, it could have been any one of them. It just happens to be Sally. And it's just like, she's made it this far. It's daytime now. There's always like kind of a hope with daylight because there might be more cars on the road. You can see where you're going. There's loads of different like things that give you a tiny bit more hope. And maybe that's what spurs her on to actually do that actual final run down that drive to the road, even though like he's slashing at her back. But the idea that this person, I can't even imagine how it would feel to know you're being chased with a chainsaw. Like, a knife is one thing. Like, yes, you can be slashed with a knife. It's still incredibly scary, but you could survive that if you stay just far enough ahead. If someone gets you with a chainsaw, like, even a little bit
of chainsaw, it's still too much chainsaw.
And like, so the fact that she has someone literally slashing at back, but there's also someone running up with a chainsaw who, if they get close to her, that's it. What I mean about there not being small parts, there's that guy who's driving the big like lorry, like truck thing. And you don't even know he like gets out with a spanner. It's like, what are you doing? Like, get Sally in and go. But he like tries to fight a little bit. But I love the characters. They've been like, no, he's a whole person who has this different idea of what he's going to do in this situation. There's literally not a part they haven't thought about as like a human being of like, what would you do if you saw this? You probably wouldn't do something incredibly logical. You just be like, you panic a little bit.
You grab a wrench and you just throw it at the guy with the chainsaw.
Right, and then run away. Because you're like, I don't know what's going on. Like, because it's like, you don't know what's happening. And I love that they've made everyone just incredibly, like, the guy in the truck she eventually escapes with. Yeah, he's like a bit like, what the fuck? Absolutely not. Like, because you're seeing this insane situation. You don't know what's going on, but you know there's a guy with a fucking chainsaw. Like, I don't know. It's just gorgeous. It's just so good. Yeah, and I really, and the big truck runs over the hitchhiker guy, right? So he, as far as he knows, he's just run someone. He doesn't even know the context of which he's run. He's definitely killed someone, and he doesn't even know, was he a bad guy? Was he a good guy? Who knows? Like, what's going on there? I'm like, I love that this is exactly, it would be this messy and this insane. It won't be this clear-cut rescue situation where she's definitely safe now. It's like, no, until she's actually driving away. That's why she starts laughing, because it's the first point where she actually knows she's safe. They can't catch up to the truck. This person tried to avoid it, so probably doesn't know them. And she's not actually okay. That's what I love about it. It's like, there's going to be a point where this is all sinking in. And it's just going to be horrifying. She's going to have to explain to several people what's happened. She doesn't even know what happened to her friends. She can only explain what happened to her and what happened to Franklin. Her friends are just missing at this point. And it's just going to be this insane... The rest of her life is going to be bonkers.
The therapy bills are going to be insane for Sally.
Oh my lord. I don't even just sitting down and explaining to the police, like, I don't, even being in a hospital, you just be a bit like, I don't want to talk about any of this. Like, even having to say stuff like, well, then I was bleeding and they put my finger in the grandpa's mouth, and he sucked my finger for a while, and then I kind of lost a moment there. I don't really know what happened for a little bit. And then we were at the dinner table, and I don't know.
Leatherface was wearing a tie. He was really fussy about the dinner.
Like, he was really stressed. He was really overwhelmed, guys. Like, really overwhelmed with the whole thing. Like, just she hasn't even seen she didn't really see the, like, bone room. She ran upstairs at one point and saw the rotted grandma in the chair. But, like, imagine just trying to explain the details of this, where there are for Sally especially, there are so many gaps. She hasn't experienced all the stuff that we've seen. So, like, there are actually a huge amount of gaps, and it's just like, she's going to sound crazy, especially in Texas. They're going to be like, all right, love, like, she's just some silly woman. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's also, they really give you an idea of the mentality, even the people there. Like, when they go to the graveyard, again, all the characters are so specific. They're very much like old style Texan men. They're all wearing like Texan hats and like speaking, and it's like they have a very specific way of being and like living, and it's going to be very hard from her from this point. Her like ordeal isn't actually over.
To start wrapping up, kind of, we've mentioned the fact that this film is incredibly, not just iconic, although that word gets thrown around a lot, but truly is, but also incredibly influential, regularly, consistently named as one of the greatest horror films ever made, and it has been name-checked by a lot of subsequent filmmakers, including like John Carpenter and Wes Craven, as being an influence on their work as well. So it was influencing peers as well as people who came, in future generations of horror filmmakers. But I wanted to ask you, did you notice, kind of, what do you think are some of the tropes of the genre that Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of established or birthed in this film? Things that have now become conventions and almost cliches, but that at that time and in this film were kind of original, or the closest thing to original as we can talk about.
Well, I think like the idea of like the weird hitchhiker even though he doesn't start murdering, I think the trope's kind of gone more to the side, like, you're going to pick up a hitchhiker, he's going to somehow be charming, and then he's going to murder all of you. But it's just like, sometimes people who seem weird are weird.
It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson.
It's a good lesson to learn. And I think it's that idea of like, I think that the idea of stranger danger in a film, of like, yeah, that person who you probably shouldn't pick up, like, and I think stranger, he's like a literal, like, strange stranger, but I think it's kind of devolved into like oh, maybe he's cute, but he's still a stranger. But that idea of like, you shouldn't be so trusting, going into a house that you don't know, like a weird house, again, is probably weird. And also the idea of like small town folk, like the idea of like, oh, weird family, small town folk who live on their own. And if you accidentally venture into their patch, that's it for you. I think that's also a thing it's established. Like, I think it's like, it reminds me of like The Hills Have Eyes. It's like stuff like that, where it's just like, if you get close enough to this weird place, or also Wrong Turn, the new Wrong Turn that's just come, like is like very much of that ilk as well, of like, you just happen to go the wrong way. Also the killer who's faceless and relentless, like the stamina, more props to Leatherface, but he's running through those woods wielding a chainsaw.
That's a lot of core work.
Yeah, he's murdered 3 people that day. He's incredibly strong. He like, there's at the end, he even like, the chainsaw falls on his leg and he's still able to get up and do this like chainsaw dance with it. This idea of this kind of inhuman like strength and whatever that comes with a killer, that's faceless and, you know, it's not anything you recognize as a person, is also something that's come from it. Like, he's so iconic in that, you know, he's not everywhere in the same way other killers are, but it's like that sound of a chainsaw coming for you and he's running for you. He's not walking slowly, he is running for you, which is terrifying. And he won't really stop. The only reason he stops chasing Sally in the beginning is because she gets to the place, it's the gas place and barbecue, because he knows that the dad guy's going to get her. And the idea that someone could be, you're exhausted, but there's someone who's holding a chainsaw and still running after you and won't stop, is horrifying. And we see it, like that idea of someone relentlessly coming for you all the time, who's stronger than you, who, I don't know, knows the woods better than you. So I think all those things, we see that idea like come up. I think quite a lot of being trapped in a house, or like stumbling into a room and finding something horrifying, and like slowly realizing how bad your situation is by the things you're seeing around you. I think it's just, there's so many moments you could pick like any scene from that film, I think, and find its like counterpart in films now, and like it be an inspiration for something now, apart from no one does the overwhelmed murder enough for my liking.
Let's make that a trope.
Someone do that, please. Like, no one's really using that part where they're like, he does not meaning to. Like, it's just how he was raised, guys. He's actually just overwhelmed.
And obviously the final goal trope, which is much studied and much written about. Not that it was kind of a thing like that, came a bit later with the Carol Clover book, which I think is from the early 90s, but in retrospect they were talking about Sally as one of the original final girls, one of the prototypes for that. And there will be films later on in the next few years, in the 70s and the mid 70s, that will kind of completely solidify that trope. And you can see that even a few years down the line with Halloween, this kind of relentless, faceless shape that is just a murder machine and doesn't really have a logical justification or reason for wanting to murder or go after kind of the specific people that he does, but he does, and he will not stop and almost cannot be killed. And the same thing with Leatherface, and also kind of the mask as well. We haven't really spoken about the mask, but the mask the Leatherface literally that gives him his name is kind of a sort of a kind of human-ish mask made out of leather, maybe made out of someone's literal face, and we never see him except for this one scene where there's quite a few close-ups of just his mouth and his eyes moving around, and it's so intensely creepy because we just see the glimpses of the man behind the mask, but we never actually see him. And this
Yeah.
idea kind of the mask killer whose masks becomes much more iconic, or at least synonymous with the killer itself, then will be replicated ad nauseum with slasher films to come, and not even slasher films, like a ton of other kind of horror films that sit somewhere between the slasher and other
Yeah.
subgenres. Those are some of the things that I think are incredibly consistently imitated from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as the kind of the weird family, like the weird family dynamic of like, let's kill together.
Yeah, we all do this as a family, and it's the normal thing we do. It's just like our culture. But like, also, I just think what I do wish that things did take away from it is that, like what we're saying about it not being sexy, they've made like final girls and like even killers like so like, I don't know, enticing in some ways. Not ways. It's like, it doesn't need to be. Like, no one actually needs to be sexy, especially by the end of it. No one should be by the end of it. But like, also, like nothing's glossy about this film. Nothing's like polished about it. And yeah, I kind of wish that was something that was moving with it. This idea, and no one being special. Also, not the reason that this girl's being chased down is because she's special. It's like, no, she's just a regular girl trying to live her regular life, and horrible things are happening to her, which I think is much scarier. Because we're all regular girls, and actually that's like much scarier, the idea that, which is real life horror, right? It could happen to any one of us. So yeah, I kind of wish those are things that would start coming back a bit more, because that film does it so well. It's right there. Like, I don't know, it's like, and that's what makes it that's really what makes it special. It's not, it doesn't have any of the sexy things that newer films have. And I'm just like, it's still so special. There's a reason it's referenced so much and referred to so much, and the reason you can take so much from it and see where like a lot of other films started, like with the ideas from. Yeah, I just think it's almost perfect. I mean, if I wasn't too scared to call anything perfect, I'd say it was perfect, like a perfect horror film.
And before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to say about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that we haven't covered in this conversation?
Watch it again. Watch it several times if you have watched it already. There's so much detail in there. It's actually kind of amazing, and it's honestly just, I think, a beautiful example of a really amazing film work that probably didn't cost a huge amount. It's just beautiful filmmaking. It's just really good performance, acting, and it's what like horror films, I don't know, should aspire to be. A lot of horror films, not all horror films, but like it's a good thing to aspire to be. If you can do that, if you can get those performances, if you can create that feeling, and also with sound design, like every element matters, every character matters. I think it's just across the board well-rounded, and they've really made the most of this story and what they're doing with it and what they've got. Yeah, I just adore it. I adore that. Even the fact that they have a character who's in a wheelchair in it. I can't even think really of other films. And also, he's a full character. It's not about him being real. Franklin's annoying. That's his character. He just also happens to be. And I was like, the fact that they were doing this at this time, they're like, yeah, this is also a thing. Is just, and again, they don't make him special because of it. It's just like, he's a brother. He's this guy.
That's it.
This is part of his life. Yeah. And I just think, and I feel like it must have been risky. It must have felt risky at the time to make that film. I can't imagine I've had any idea how that would have been received, and that it would have the legacy it has now. And I just feel like that should be a cue for other directors to like take that same risk, to do what you want, to make the film you actually want to make the characters you actually want what you want to, and it will come through. To trust that, to trust actors, to trust performance, to trust your sound design, to trust your like story, because audience is smart. They'll get it. They don't need huge exposition. They don't need detailed backstory. They don't need your characters to be like these specific tropes. They can just be people. And I think it's a testament to that.
What a beautiful note to end on. Isora, thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
You.
So, as per usual, where can people find more of your work online?
You can follow me at Isara_HBB or underscore BB.
It's BB.
Which one is it? BB. Got it. That's on Twitter, and you can follow me at Isorosaurus on Instagram. I've really forgotten all the social media. I'm like on that other app, which at the moment is mostly pictures of me in a castle, but there'll be other postings about stuff. And also you can find me on the Final Girls website, under their Bloody Women film journal, with my column and other writing. My column's called Bloody Perfect, and yeah, that's where you'll find me everywhere.
And I will link to your wonderfully written article about Sally in the show notes, so everybody go read that.
Yes, my first ever Bloody Perfect column, which was like the most fun to write. So yeah,
and it was perfect.
I also talk about it in the first thing I ever wrote for the Final Girls, which was the Psycho Killers Prefer Blondes, which is about Final Girls and them not being black, but I think I mentioned Sally in it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.